Welcome back to Jungle War Stories. Before we begin, please press the subscribe button. It helps more than you might think. Thank you. There's something I've kept hidden for 26 years that I need to tell you. It's not that I don't want to. It's because I have to. Because they made me sign papers stating that if I told anyone what happened in the Mojave Desert in the summer of 1998, I would spend the rest of my life in federal prison. But now I'm 73 years old. I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors say I have maybe 4 months left, probably less. So what will they do to me? What could be worse than what I've already lived through? My name is Marcus Reed. For 31 years, I was a senior forest ranger with the Bureau of Land Management. I thought I knew the desert. I thought I understood it. The heat that can kill you before you realize death is upon you. The silence that presses on your ears until you hear the sounds that aren't there. The way the earth can swallow people and never give them back. I saw hikers who didn't bring enough water, their dried-up bodies found days later. I saw miners lost in canyons that all looked alike, walking in circles until they fell. I thought I'd seen the worst the Mojave had to offer. I was very wrong. In June 1998, my team was assigned to survey an area about 47 miles northeast of Barstow, California. It was supposed to be routine work. We needed to map water sources, check on the population of protected Joshua trees, and document illegal mining activities. This area had not been properly surveyed since 1986. It had been neglected for 12 years. Due to budget cuts, we were told. There weren't enough rangers, there wasn't enough funding, there wasn't enough time to cover the millions of acres under the BLM's jurisdiction. So this desert region just sat there, forgotten by everyone. There were 6 of us on the team. I was 47 years old at the time, a senior forest ranger with nearly 25 years of experience in this field. I had worked everywhere from the Sonoran Desert to the Great Basin, mapped hundreds of square miles of wilderness, and trained dozens of young forest rangers. But the Mojave was my home. It was where I started my career, met my first wife, and buried my parents. I knew its moods, its dangers, its secrets. I knew the wind could suddenly appear and blind you with sand. I knew the temperature could drop 40 degrees after sunset. I knew some places felt wrong, like they were watching you. I thought I understood it all. Tom Hendricks was my second in command. He was 51 years old, a quiet man from Nevada who'd worked the desert for 24 years. We'd been on dozens of surveys together, spent more nights around campfires than I could count. He was the kind of ranger who noticed things other people missed. A broken branch that meant someone had passed by recently. A disturbed rock that suggested illegal digging. An animal track that didn't quite fit the terrain. He had instincts that couldn't be taught, only developed over decades of paying attention. Tom had a wife named Dorothy and 2 daughters, Jennifer and Claire, both in college at the time. Jennifer was studying nursing at UNLV. Claire was doing pre-law at University of Arizona. Tom was so proud of them. He showed me their pictures every time we went out on a survey. Every single time. He'd pull out this weathered leather wallet that his father had given him when he'd graduated from high school, and he'd show me the same photographs, and he'd tell me the same stories about their childhoods, their accomplishments, their plans for the future. I used to think it was repetitive, maybe even a little annoying, but looking back, I think he was afraid. I think he was afraid that if he didn't remind himself constantly, he might forget what he was working for. He might lose sight of why any of this mattered. The morning we left Barstow, Tom showed me those pictures again. Jennifer in her nursing scrubs, Claire in front of the law library, Dorothy in the garden behind their house in Henderson, surrounded by roses she'd spent years cultivating. He held that wallet carefully, like it contained something more precious than money. Because it did. I never saw Tom again after that day in the desert. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if Dorothy ever saw him again or if Jennifer and Claire ever learned what happened to their father. I've spent 26 years wondering. 26 years feeling guilty. 26 years wishing I'd done something different. Sarah Chen was our botanist. She was 36 years old with a PhD from UC Davis in desert ecology and a passion for the Mojave that bordered on obsession. She could look at a Joshua tree and tell you its age within 5 years just by examining the branching pattern. She could identify a plant species from 50 yards away based on the shape of its leaves and the color of its flowers. She knew the Latin names of everything, the historical names, the indigenous names. She could tell you which plants the native peoples had used for food, which for medicine, which for poison. Sarah had turned down a tenure-track position at a research university to work in the field. She said she couldn't stand being away from the desert for more than a few days at a time. She said the desert was her church. It was where she went to feel small and humble and connected to something larger than herself. When she talked about the Mojave, her whole face lit up. Her eyes got bright and her hands moved through the air like she was conducting music. She made you see the beauty in places that most people thought were ugly and empty. She made you understand why it was worth protecting. I remember the last conversation I had with Sarah before everything went wrong. We were driving toward the survey area, and she was telling me about a paper she was writing on the relationship between Joshua trees and yucca moths. She was so animated, so excited about her research. She said she thought she'd discovered something that might change the way scientists understood desert ecosystems. She was going to present her findings at a conference in September. She never made it to that conference. She never finished that paper. Another thing that was taken from the world because of what we found out there. David Morrison handled our GPS and communications equipment. He was 43 years old, former Army, served 2 tours in Desert Storm as a communications specialist. He never talked about his service. Whenever anyone asked him about it, he'd change the subject or just go quiet. But sometimes at night, when he thought no one was watching, I'd see him sitting alone, staring at nothing, his hands trembling slightly. He had that look that a lot of combat veterans have, the look that said he'd seen things he couldn't unsee, couldn't forget, couldn't make peace with. David was meticulous about his equipment. Every wire checked 3 times, every battery tested, every frequency logged, every backup system verified. He said that in the Army a failed radio could mean dead soldiers. A wrong coordinate could call an airstrike on your own position. The equipment wasn't just tools. It was the difference between life and death. He wasn't going to let anything go wrong because of equipment failure. Not on his watch, not ever. He had a daughter too, Sophie. She was 7 years old at the time, living with her mother in Riverside after the divorce. David called her every night when we were in the field. Every single night, no matter how tired he was, no matter how late it got, no matter how bad the satellite reception was. He'd walk away from the camp to get better signal, sometimes half a mile or more, just to hear her voice. He told me once that Sophie was the only good thing that came out of his marriage, the only thing that made all the bad stuff worth it. He said that when he heard her laugh, everything else went away. All the memories, all the nightmares, all the pain. Just for a moment, everything was okay. I wonder if he ever got to talk to her again after that day. I wonder if she knows what happened to her father. I wonder if she spent the last 26 years waiting for him to call. James Patterson was our geologist, fresh out of graduate school at Colorado State. He was 28 years old, eager to prove himself, full of theories about rock formations and mineral deposits and tectonic history. He talked too much and asked too many questions and sometimes got on everyone's nerves with his endless enthusiasm. But he was smart and he was dedicated and he genuinely loved the work. He wanted to understand everything. He wanted to know why the rocks were shaped the way they were, why certain minerals appeared in certain places, why the landscape looked the way it looked. He saw stories in the stones that other people just walked over. James told me once that he wanted to be a ranger because he wanted to protect the land for future generations. He said too many people saw the desert as empty, as wasteland, as nothing, as a place to dump trash and test bombs and forget about. He wanted to show them that it was full of life and beauty and wonder if you just knew where to look. He said the desert was like a library. Every rock was a book. Every layer of sediment was a page. And if you learned how to read it, you could understand millions of years of history. He was so young. He had so much ahead of him. He was going to do important work. He was going to make discoveries. He was going to change how people saw this land. All of that was taken away. All of that potential just gone. Because I made a decision that I shouldn't have made. And then there was Miguel Rodriguez. Miguel was 26 years old. It was his first major field assignment. He'd grown up in East Los Angeles, in a neighborhood where gunshots were more common than birdsong. His parents had immigrated from Mexico before he was born. His father worked construction jobs, long hours in the sun, coming home so tired he could barely eat. His mother cleaned hotel rooms, pushing her cart down endless hallways, making beds for people who never saw her face. They worked so hard, sacrificed so much, just so their children would have a chance at something better. Miguel put himself through community college while working 2 jobs, night shifts at a warehouse, weekends at a fast food restaurant. He transferred to Cal State Fullerton, where he'd studied environmental science. He applied to the BLM 3 times before they finally hired him. 3 times. Most people would have given up after the first rejection, found an easier path, but not Miguel. He wanted it too badly. He believed in it too much. He told me that the day he got the acceptance letter was the proudest moment of his life. He called his mother and she cried. She couldn't believe it. Her son, a federal employee, her son, protecting the land, doing important work, making a difference. He sent half his paycheck home every month to help his parents pay their mortgage. He never complained about it. He never mentioned it unless someone asked. He just did it because that's who he was. Miguel was quiet and respectful and worked harder than anyone else on the team. He was always the first one up in the morning and the last one to bed at night. He volunteered for every task, never waited to be asked. He wanted so badly to do well. He wanted so badly to prove that he belonged. He wanted to show everyone that the kid from East LA, the son of immigrants, could be just as good as anyone else. I still remember Miguel's face when we left the station that morning. He was so excited. His eyes were bright and he couldn't stop smiling. He kept checking his gear, making sure he had everything, running through the checklist again and again. He asked me 3 times if he was doing okay. I told him he was doing fine. I told him he was going to be a great ranger someday. I told him to relax and enjoy the experience. I think about that conversation every single day for 26 years. Because I'm the reason he's gone. I'm the reason his mother lost her son. I'm the one who let him go into that darkness. We drove northeast from the Barstow Field Station in 2 vehicles, a pair of white BLM Ford Broncos loaded with survey equipment and supplies. Tom drove the lead vehicle with Sarah and James. I drove the second one with David and Miguel. The paved road ended after about 20 miles, and then it was just dirt tracks and open desert. The landscape stretched out to the horizon, flat and brown and empty, broken only by the occasional Joshua tree or rocky outcropping. The temperature climbed as the day went on. By noon, it was over 100 degrees. The air shimmered above the sand, creating mirages that looked like lakes in the distance. That's how the desert tricks you. It shows you what you want to see. Water that isn't there. Shade that doesn't exist. Hope that leads you further and further into danger until you're too weak to find your way back. Miguel stared out the window, taking in everything. He'd never been this far into the desert before. He'd never seen anything so vast and empty and quiet. He asked me questions about the terrain, the wildlife, the history of the area. I answered as best I could, trying to share some of my knowledge, trying to help him feel prepared. At one point, he turned to me and said that he couldn't believe this was his job. He said he couldn't believe he got paid to be out here, in this amazing place, doing work that mattered. I smiled and told him that the novelty would wear off eventually. I told him to enjoy it while it lasted. I wish I had said something else. I wish I had told him how much potential I saw in him. I wish I had told him that I was proud to have him on my team. I wish I had told him to call his mother that night and tell her he loved her. But I didn't. I just made a joke about the job getting old, and that was the last real conversation we ever had. By late afternoon, we reached the survey area. It was a stretch of rocky terrain surrounded by low mountains, isolated, remote, at least 30 miles from the nearest paved road. Nothing unusual at first glance. Joshua trees scattered across the landscape like frozen figures reaching toward the sky. Creosote bushes releasing their distinctive smell, like rain on hot pavement. The usual desert vegetation clinging to life in the harsh conditions. We set up base camp in a dry wash that offered some shade from the canyon walls. Everyone worked together to pitch tents, organize equipment, prepare the cooking area. The mood was good. James told jokes that weren't very funny but made us laugh anyway. Sarah pointed out interesting plants she spotted nearby. David got the satellite phone working and checked in with the district office. Miguel helped with everything, eager to contribute. That first night, we ate dinner together around the camp stove as the sun went down and the temperature started to drop. The sky turned orange, then red, then purple, then black. The stars came out, more than I'd ever seen, a river of light stretching across the darkness. It was beautiful, peaceful, safe. But later that night, after the others had gone to their tents, Tom came to me. He had a strange look on his face, troubled. He said he didn't like this place. He said the desert felt wrong here. I asked him what he meant. He stood there for a long moment, trying to find the words. Then he said that in 24 years of working the Mojave, he'd never felt anything like this. The silence was different, he said. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't the normal quiet of an empty landscape, the kind of quiet that felt restful and calm. This silence was heavy. It pressed against you. It felt like something was holding its breath, like something was watching and waiting. I told him he was being superstitious. I told him it was just the unfamiliar terrain, the isolation, the long drive. I told him to get some sleep and he'd feel better in the morning, but I was lying. Because I felt it too. There was something about this place that made the hair on my arms stand up. Something that made me want to pack up camp and drive away and never look back. I couldn't explain it any better than Tom could. It was just a feeling, deep in my gut, primal, undeniable. A feeling that we shouldn't be here, that something was very, very wrong. I wish I had listened to that feeling. I wish I had trusted my instincts, trusted Tom's instincts, and gotten us all out of there before the sun came up. But I didn't. The next morning, we split into 2 teams to cover more ground. I took Tom and Miguel with me to survey the eastern section. Sarah, David, and James headed west toward a series of rocky outcroppings that James wanted to examine. Before we separated, David did a radio check. All frequencies clear, all equipment working. He reminded everyone to check in every hour. He told us to call immediately if anything seemed off. I should have listened to him. I should have paid attention to his caution. But I was the senior ranger. I was in charge, and I thought I knew what I was doing. The morning passed without incident. We documented plant species, took soil samples, photographed rock formations. Normal work. routine. The sun climbed higher, and the temperature rose with it, past 100 degrees, past 105, past 110. The air was so dry it hurt to breathe. The rocks shimmered in the heat. By noon, the temperature had reached 112 degrees. We stopped in the shade of a large boulder to eat lunch and drink water. Tom passed around sandwiches from the cooler. Miguel drank half his water bottle in one long gulp. I reminded him to pace himself. Water was life out here. Run out of water, and you were dead. That's when Miguel noticed something. He was looking through his binoculars at a ridge about half a mile to the north. He said he saw something up there, something that reflected the light, something that didn't look natural. I took the binoculars from him and looked. At first I didn't see anything, just rocks and sand and scrub brush, the same as everywhere else. But then the sun shifted slightly, and I saw it. There was something built into the side of the ridge. It was partially hidden by a rock overhang, almost invisible unless you were looking from exactly the right angle at exactly the right time of day. It looked like a door, a metal door, set directly into the rock face. My stomach dropped. A cold feeling spread through my chest despite the heat. Tom asked me what it was. I said I didn't know, but we needed to find out. We radioed Sarah's team and told them what we'd found. David's voice came back, clear and concerned. He asked if we needed them to come. They were about 3 miles away, too far to join us quickly. I told them to continue their survey and we'd report back in 2 hours. I told them not to worry. I was wrong. Then the 3 of us started hiking toward the ridge. The closer we got, the more certain I became that this was something significant. The door wasn't some random piece of debris or abandoned mining equipment. It was man-made, industrial, professional. It was set into a concrete frame that had been built directly into the rock, engineered to blend in, to be invisible. The concrete was old, weathered, cracked in places, but solid. Whoever had built this had known what they were doing. They had spent serious money and serious effort to put something here in the middle of nowhere and hide it from the world. This wasn't an old mine or a prospector's shed or a forgotten storage unit. This was something else entirely, something that was never supposed to be found. When we reached the door, I saw that it was massive, at least 10 feet tall, maybe 7 feet wide, made of heavy steel, painted gray, though the paint had faded and peeled over the decades of exposure. There were no markings on it, no signs, no numbers, no warnings, no labels, no indication of who had built it or why or what was inside. Just a plain steel door in the middle of the desert, hidden from view, waiting. There was a control panel next to the door, a keypad, covered in dust and sand, with buttons that had once been white but were now yellowed and cracked with age. I tried pressing some buttons, but nothing happened. The system was dead. No power. Whatever had once operated this door had been shut down long ago. Tom put his hand on my shoulder. His grip was firm, almost painful. He said we should call this in, report it to the district office, get authorization. Let someone else deal with it. He said this wasn't our job. We were rangers, not investigators. Our job was to survey the land and protect it, not to explore abandoned government facilities that had been deliberately hidden. He was right. That's what we should have done. That's what protocol demanded. That's what common sense screamed. But I didn't call it in. I told myself it was because I was curious, because after 25 years in the desert, I had never seen anything like this, and I needed to understand what I was looking at. I told myself it was professional interest, the natural response of someone who had dedicated his life to knowing this land. But that wasn't the real reason. The real reason was that something was pulling me toward that door. Something I couldn't explain. couldn't resist, couldn't even fully recognize. It was like a voice in my head, just below the level of conscious thought, whispering, urging, insisting. Go inside. See what's in there. You need to know. You were meant to find this. I should have recognized that feeling for what it was. A warning. A sign that something was deeply, terribly wrong. That something was manipulating me, pulling my strings, leading me into a trap. Instead, I looked for another way in. We circled the structure and found a ventilation shaft about 50 yards away. It was disguised as a natural rock formation, blending into the terrain. But when you looked closely, you could see the metal grate set into the stone. The grate was rusted and old, the bolts corroded. It came off with a few hard pulls, scraping against the rock, falling to the ground with a clang that echoed off the canyon walls. The shaft was about 3 feet in diameter, dark inside, the metal disappearing into blackness, just big enough for a person to crawl through. Tom grabbed my arm. His eyes were serious, almost desperate. He said this was a bad idea. He said we didn't know what was in there, what we might be exposing ourselves to. Chemicals, biological agents, radioactive materials. This could be some kind of Cold War facility, a weapons depot, a testing site. There could be unexploded ordnance. There could be toxic waste. There could be anything. He said we should wait for backup, for proper equipment, for authorization, for someone who knew what they were dealing with. He was right about all of it. He was right, and I knew he was right, and I ignored him anyway. Because that voice in my head wouldn't stop. Go inside. Go inside. Go inside. Miguel stepped forward. His face was determined, eager. He said he would go. He said he was the smallest. He would fit through the shaft easily. He said he wanted to help. He said he wanted to prove that he could handle anything. He wanted so badly to show me that I hadn't made a mistake by bringing him. He wanted to be the hero, the one who discovered whatever was down there, the rookie who came through when it mattered. I should have said no. I should have ordered him to stay outside. I should have gone myself if anyone was going to go. I was the senior ranger. I was responsible for this team. If there was danger, I should have been the one to face it. But I didn't. I let him go. That decision has haunted me every moment of every day for 26 years. It will haunt me until I die, which won't be long now. And it should. It should haunt me. Because I did it. I made that choice. I let that boy, that eager, hopeful, hard-working boy, climb into the darkness because I was too much of a coward to do it myself and too arrogant to walk away. Miguel took off his pack and grabbed his flashlight and radio. Before he climbed into the shaft, he looked at me. I saw complete trust in his eyes, faith that I would keep him safe, faith that I knew what I was doing, faith that I would never put him in danger that he couldn't handle. I told him to be careful. I told him to radio us as soon as he saw anything. I told him that if something seemed wrong, anything at all, he should come back immediately. He nodded and smiled. He said he would. Then he crawled into the shaft and disappeared into the darkness. Tom and I waited outside, listening to his breathing over the radio, the scraping of his elbows and knees against the metal, his occasional grunts of effort. The sounds echoed strangely, distorted by the shaft, making it hard to tell how far he had gone. After about 5 minutes, his voice came over the radio. He said he'd reached the end of the shaft. He said there was a drop into a larger space below, maybe 10 feet. He was going to lower himself down. I told him to be careful. He said he would. Then there was silence, a long silence. Too long. I called his name. No response. I called again. Still nothing. Tom and I looked at each other. His face was pale. He started to say something, but then Miguel's voice came back over the radio. It was different, shaky, scared. The words came out fast, tumbling over each other like he couldn't get them out fast enough. He said we needed to see this. He said we needed to get inside right now. He said there were things down here, things that couldn't be real, things that changed everything. I asked him what he'd found. He didn't answer. He just kept saying we needed to see it. We needed to understand. His voice was rising, getting more agitated, more panicked. Then he said something that made my blood go cold. He said they weren't human. Tom was already moving toward the shaft. I followed, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, my ears, my fingertips. Whatever was down there, I had to see it. I had to know what had scared Miguel so badly. I had to get him out. The shaft was tight, claustrophobic. The metal pressed against my shoulders as I crawled. It smelled like rust and stale air and something else underneath, something organic, something old. The darkness ahead of me was absolute, broken only by the beam of my flashlight bouncing off the walls. I could hear Tom behind me, his breathing heavy, his body scraping against the metal. The drop at the end was about 12 feet into a dark corridor. I could see Miguel's flashlight below, a small circle of light in the blackness. I lowered myself down, hanging from the edge of the shaft by my fingertips, then let go. I landed hard, my knees buckling, pain shooting up my legs. Tom came down a moment later, grunting as he hit the concrete floor. We were in a corridor. Concrete walls, concrete floor, concrete ceiling. No paint, no decorations. Just gray, stretching into darkness in both directions. The air was cool and dry, preserved by the desert climate above. There was no smell of decay or mold. It was like the place had been sealed in time, untouched for decades. Miguel was standing a few feet away. His flashlight was pointed down the corridor. His face was pale, almost white. His hands were trembling so badly that the flashlight beam shook. I asked him what was wrong. He looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. Terror. Real, absolute, overwhelming terror. The kind of terror that breaks something inside you. He pointed down the corridor. He said, "Follow me." He said he couldn't explain it. I had to see it myself. We walked for maybe 100 yards, our footsteps echoing off the walls, the sound bouncing back to us multiplied and distorted. Tom had drawn his sidearm. I realized that I had drawn mine too, without thinking about it. The weight of the gun in my hand was comforting, but I knew instinctively that it was useless. Whatever was down here, a gun wouldn't help. A gun was nothing against what we were about to see. Then the corridor opened into a larger room. It was some kind of control center. Banks of old computers lined the walls, massive machines with reel-to-reel tape drives and blinking lights that had long since gone dark. Filing cabinets stood in rows, dozens of them, all closed, all locked. There were desks with papers still on them, coffee cups with dried residue at the bottom, personal items left behind, photographs, a sweater draped over a chair, a half-eaten candy bar. As if the people who worked here had just stepped away for a moment and never come back. But that wasn't what made Miguel shake. That wasn't what made me feel like the floor was falling away beneath my feet. On the far wall, there was a window. A large observation window, maybe 20 feet wide, made of thick glass that was clouded with age but still transparent. And beyond that window was a chamber. A massive underground chamber, bigger than a football field carved out of the solid rock of the desert. And in that chamber, there were bodies. Not human bodies. Something else. They were laid out on metal tables. Dozens of them, arranged in neat rows like specimens in a laboratory. They were humanoid in shape, but wrong. Their limbs were too long, jointed in too many places. Their heads were too large for their bodies, elongated, bulbous, with features that were almost like faces but not quite. No ears, no nose. just indentations where those features should have been, and large, dark spaces where the eyes had been. Their skin, what was left of it, was gray and withered, desiccated by the dry air but clearly ancient. They had been dead for a very long time. Decades at least, maybe centuries, maybe longer. I stood there staring through that window, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Trying to find some explanation that didn't involve accepting that everything I thought I knew about the world was wrong. But there was no explanation. There was no rational way to interpret what was in front of me. My mind raced through possibilities. Government experiment, movie props, elaborate hoax, some kind of art installation. Anything other than the truth that was staring back at me through that glass. But I knew. Deep down, in that part of yourself that knows things before your conscious mind catches up, I knew that what I was looking at was real. These weren't props or experiments or hoaxes. These were beings, creatures, entities that had lived and breathed and existed somewhere, sometime, in ways that we couldn't understand and weren't meant to see. Tom was moving around the control room, looking at the papers on the desks, the filing cabinets, the computers. His hands were shaking, but he was still trying to do his job, still trying to gather information, still trying to make sense of the situation. That was Tom. Always professional. Always thorough. Even when everything was falling apart. He called me over to one of the desks. There was a folder there, thick with documents, covered in dust. The cover was stamped with words that made my blood run cold. Project Genesis, Level 5, Clearance, Eyes Only. He opened it. Inside were photographs. Black and white, grainy, old. Photographs of the things in the chamber. Photographs of scientists in white coats examining them. Photographs of military officers standing in this very room, looking through this very window. There were documents too, pages of text that I couldn't fully read in the dim light of my flashlight, but I caught words and phrases. Recovery, containment, communication attempts, biological analysis, and dates. The documents were dated from the 1950s, 1954, 1957, 1959. Whatever this program was, it had been running for over 40 years, maybe longer, and we had never known. The whole world had gone about its business, living normal lives, worrying about normal problems, while this place sat here in the desert, holding secrets that would change everything if they ever got out. I reached for the folder, wanting to take it with us, wanting to have proof of what we'd seen. But that's when Miguel spoke. He said he heard something. These things, whatever they were real. They existed. And someone, some government agency, some secret program, had known about them, had collected them, had studied them, had hidden them here in the middle of the desert where no one would ever find them. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that some of the tables were empty. The restraints that had held the bodies in place, thick metal bands around the wrists and ankles and necks, were broken, snapped, torn apart. The bodies that had been there were gone, and there were tracks on the dusty floor of the chamber, tracks that led from the empty tables toward a door on the far side. Something had gotten out. Tom grabbed my arm. His voice was urgent, barely controlled. He said we needed to leave. We needed to leave right now and never come back. He said we needed to call this in, get the military involved, seal this place off forever. He was right. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, staring at those bodies, those things, my mind trying to process the impossible. Miguel was the one who broke the spell. He said he heard something, a sound, coming from deeper inside the facility. We all went quiet and listened. At first I didn't hear anything, just the silence of the underground space, the faint hum of dead machines, the sound of my own heart pounding. But then, I heard it too. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Not human footsteps. The rhythm was wrong, the gait uneven, like something walking on limbs that weren't designed for walking, something moving through the darkness beyond the chamber, getting closer, coming toward us. Tom didn't wait. He grabbed Miguel and started running back toward the corridor. I was right behind them. We ran, our flashlight beams bouncing wildly off the walls, our footsteps echoing, our breath ragged. The footsteps behind us were getting louder, faster. Whatever was making them, it knew we were here. It was coming for us. We reached the ventilation shaft, and Tom boosted Miguel up first. He climbed fast, faster than I'd ever seen anyone move, scrambling up through the metal tube, his hands and knees scraping, his breath coming in panicked gasps. Then Tom went up, and I was alone in the corridor. I looked back. At the end of the corridor, where it opened into the control room, there was a figure standing in the darkness. I couldn't see it clearly. Just a shape, tall and thin, with limbs that bent the wrong way. It was standing perfectly still, watching me. It didn't move. It just stood there, and then it raised one of its long arms and pointed at me. Pointed directly at me. I didn't wait. I jumped, grabbed the edge of the shaft, pulled myself up. I crawled through that tunnel faster than I've ever moved in my life. When I came out the other side into the blinding desert sun, I collapsed on the ground and couldn't stop shaking. Tom was on the satellite phone calling for help. Miguel was sitting against a rock, his head in his hands, making sounds that weren't crying and weren't screaming, but something in between. We waited for 2 hours until the helicopter arrived. 2 hours watching that shaft, terrified that something would come out of it. Nothing did. But something had changed. Something had shifted, and it was never going to shift back. The helicopter brought men in black suits. No badges, no names. They separated us immediately. Tom in one helicopter, Miguel in another. I never saw either of them again. They made me sign papers that said I'd go to prison if I ever spoke about what happened. They told me that the facility didn't exist. It had never existed. For 3 weeks I heard nothing. Then I tried to contact my team. Their phone numbers were disconnected. Tom's wife didn't recognize me. Miguel's apartment was empty. My entire team had been erased. Except me. I spent 26 years keeping the secret. I got married, had a daughter, got divorced, started drinking, almost died. The memories never faded. The nightmares never stopped. Last year, I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. That's why I'm talking now. 3 months ago, I went back to those coordinates. The facility was gone. The whole ridge was just solid rock, like it had never been there. But I heard a voice, clear as day. It said they'd been waiting. It said they needed me to remember. It said to tell the world what's coming. Then it was gone. I don't know what those things were. I don't know where they came from or what they want. But I know they're real. I know they're still out there. And I know they're waking up. Miguel Rodriguez was 26 years old. He trusted me and I let him down. I've thought about his mother a lot over the years. The woman who cleaned hotel rooms so her son could have a better life. The woman who cried with joy when he called to say he'd gotten the job. I wonder if she ever learned what happened. I wonder if she spent years waiting for him to come home, waiting for a phone call, waiting for some explanation. I wonder if she's still alive, still waiting, still hoping. I hope she found peace somehow. I hope she found a way to live with the not knowing. But I doubt it. I know what it's like to carry that weight. I know what it's like to lie awake at night wondering what happened to someone you love. Miguel deserved to have a long life. He deserved to become a great ranger, to do the work he cared about, to make a difference. He deserved to find someone to love, to have children of his own, to grow old surrounded by family. He deserved all the things that were taken from him because I made a decision that I had no right to make. I'm sorry, Miguel. I'm so sorry. And Tom. Dorothy is probably still in that house in Henderson, surrounded by her roses. Jennifer and Claire are grown now, in their 40s, with families of their own maybe. Do they know what happened to their father? Do they remember him? Do they still have the pictures he carried in his wallet? I hope they do. I hope they remember him the way I do. As a good man. A careful man. A man who loved his family more than anything in the world. Sarah and David and James. All of them gone. All of them erased. All of them taken from people who loved them, who needed them, who deserved answers that they'll never get. My name is Marcus Reed. I'm dying of cancer in a small house in Barstow, alone with my memories and my regrets. Something is out there, something ancient, something powerful. And it's waking up. Be ready. Thanks for watching Jungle War Stories. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, tell me where you're listening from. And if you're ever in the Mojave Desert, in those empty places where the silence feels like it's holding its breath, be careful. You might not be as alone as you think.